There are two sides to every story. The National Broadcasting Company presents the vivid drama of life itself. Broadcasting's original program of Mediation, the Court of Human Relations. And now the man who has familiarized millions of people with the idea of mediation helped to make it a creative force in American life. A.L. Alexander.
In these times, when the sharp tensions of everyday living place a special burden on the relationships of the family and the home, we submit each day to our mediation panel an issue of real life. Now, the object of the mediation idea is to bring about better understanding through the friendly intervention of impartial mediators, emphasizing cooperation or some element of compromise to take the place of continued disorder and confusion. Now, here is an actual mediation proceeding, a demonstration of method that the technique of mediation and the handling of human relations generally may be advanced. Here are the mediators whom these people have elected to accept as their judges in these matters of controversy. Judge William A. Wachenfeld, Dr. Paul Dawson Eddy, Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick. Now, gentlemen, in your opinion, can a person actually be too good? One says yes, the other can't be, no such thing. You know, people can get hopelessly entangled in a situation, especially when married, and an impartial view can do away with a lot of unpleasantness. Now, here is the complainant.
Mr. Alexander, members of the board, did you ever hear of a man who commit the sin of being too good, who doesn't have the courage to say no, a man who would lend money that he hasn't got, borrow it from someone else to do a good turn?
Well, now, outside of that, and we understand what you're trying to tell us, what type of husband do you have?
You'd never find a more loving and kind man than my husband. But he's his own worst enemy. He works very hard, has nothing to show for it, keeps borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and I find that he's ruining himself and ruining us.
Well, he just doesn't know how to say no.
He doesn't. He can continuously try to help everyone.
Well, suppose you give us an example.
Well, the other night, a neighbor rang the bell, someone in the neighborhood, and my husband answered the door, and I heard a buzz, buzz, buzz. I asked him when he came back, what did he want? He didn't want to tell me. Well, I finally got it out of him. He says the man wanted to borrow $75. I said, so what did you tell him? He says, well, I told him I'll get it for him. I said, you didn't have no money for me. I asked you. He says, well, you don't understand. The man is destitute. He needs the money, and I must get it for him. I can't.
Well, you asked him if his family doesn't come first, and will he get the money back? Did you ask him that?
Well, he says, I'll probably get it in a week or two. I says, but we need money now. How can you possibly lend money?
Well, now, we understand that. Suppose, is this the only time that this thing happened?
Oh, no. We have that on and on and on, and all the 28 years of our married life, this is
Same
a
thing.
continuous thing, one thing or another.
Well, just so these gentlemen can understand, suppose you give us another example.
Well, we had a Victrola in the house, and we enjoyed playing it very much. The children did, and so did I, and so did he. Well, one day I missed the Victrola, and I asked my husband what happened to it. He says, well, I gave it to so-and-so. I says, you gave it to her? He says, yes, I gave it to her. After all, the woman is very, very unhappy, and I feel that we got to help. I says, but we enjoy the Victrola, and so does the children. Why should you give it away? You don't understand. If I'd have to do something when somebody is so unhappy, don't we come first?
Well,
I work so hard, struggle, try to make ends meet, and he gives things away?
you have to economize?
Definitely, because I live on a very limited budget.
And you can't understand that?
Definitely.
Well, what is it that you want to know specifically then?
What I want to know is, can we keep on doing this? Paying Paul, taking from Paul to pay Peter all our lives?
Well, suppose we hear from the respondent.
Well, Mr. Alexander, members of the board, I come from a family of 8 children. I have been here 40 years. I am an immigrant, and I saw starvation. I made up my mind a long time ago that if I ever grow up, others will not suffer like I did, starting with my own family, of course, first. And if at any time I see that I can help people, I try to help. Of course, it all depends on the merit of each case.
Well, anyway, we understand that you dedicated yourself to helping other people.
Exactly.
And what is your philosophy?
Well, my philosophy is this, that some people like to play golf, some people like to buy new cars, some people like to go other places. I found out that I want to help people.
But your wife believes in security.
Well, I too believe in security, Mr. Alexander, but I also believe in people.
Do you have faith in people?
I certainly have. I always did, and I always will.
Well, now,
And
suppose
it's very
you...
hard for me to change. I imagine so. I haven't tried it, and I don't think I can.
Well,
It's my nature.
it's your nature to be good to people.
Right.
Well, now, I'm sure these mediators will be interested in understanding a little more about the actual events that have taken place so they can understand you a little better and your wife. Now, your wife told us about the $75. What about the $75?
Well, some gentleman came up my house, and he was in dire need, as my wife put it. He has a sick wife, he has 2 sick children, and a sick mother. I happen to know it was true, gentlemen. It was no lie. He wanted to speak to me in private, which he did.
And what was the substance of the conversation?
The
What did he
substance
tell
of the conversation was that the man needed $75 desperately. And, of course, me being what I am, I wouldn't say I'm the exception to the rule, but being what I am, I said, you'll have it.
Were you in a position to make the loan of the
I was
70
not. But then my wife came in the room, and she forced me to tell her what that gentleman spoke about with me, and I told her. Well, of course, she didn't like the idea. I didn't like the idea myself. But that's me again. I couldn't help myself.
Well,
When
anyway,
I see
you
a
helped.
person in need, I'm there. I don't know why, but it's just that I'm there. That's all there is to
Well,
it.
tell us your philosophy about getting money. Did you get the money from someone else? What do you...
Many times, Mr. Alexander, gentlemen, I do go out of my way to borrow the money from somebody else to give it to somebody else. I do that, yes.
Yeah.
You mean you go to Sam or...
I go to Sam to give Jones. I borrow from Sam to give Jones.
Yes. Well, now, we want to ask you about the Victrola. What about the Victrola?
Well, the Victrola, here's what happened with the Victrola. We had a Victrola. We have a combination of 3, which is a Victrola, radio, and TV in our home. We also had this Victrola. Some friend of mine, they were very unhappy, and I didn't think it was such a serious thing because they have no television, they have no Victrola, and they have no radio. While we had, God gave us both. And I felt that I would be very helpful in making them happy by giving them the Victrola. I didn't see no harm in that. We have, it isn't that we didn't have.
Yes, Mr. Alexander, I understand, but here is a man who is in debt. He owes thousands of dollars. How could he think it's right when he struggles, and we both struggle to buy something, to give it to somebody else? Right now we are enjoying the Victrola. We needed it too. The other one broke. We had nothing to play. He doesn't learn from past experiences.
You feel that he's worked all his life and has nothing to show
There's
him.
nothing to show for it. I feel it's a time now that he makes up his mind that charity begins at home. Am I not right?
Do you love your wife?
I was always crazy about my wife, Mr. Alexander, and she knows it, and I know it.
Now tell us about your family.
We have 2 lovely children. They respect us very highly. They are happily married, thank God. I, for one, did the best I could, starting with my family, as I said before. I gave them a college education. They are happily married. And I see no reason in this day and age, I'm not 30 years anymore, or 25. I'm afraid, members of the board, and Mr. Alexander, I'm afraid that it's a little too late for me to change now.
Well,
I have been this way all my life, and I don't think I can change now.
Well, the issue is not that. The issue is whether or not there is justice. After all, if you are doing an unwise thing, you certainly ought to try to change.
Well, Mr. Alexander, I don't know if you ever read it in the Bible, but in the Bible it says, bread cast upon the waters will always come back.
And that's the way you feel.
And that's the way I feel, and that's the way I'm going to live till my dying day.
And you want to borrow from Sam to help Joe?
Well, it all depends on the merits of the case, as I stated before. Yeah, I mean, if it's a severe case, I do that. But if I feel that it's not so, it's not necessary to do that, believe me, I will not do it. My home comes first. I always believed in that.
Well, I think he's answered the problem with his last statement. His home comes first. This is a very odd case where generosity is practiced to a degree where it becomes a fault. I agree with you, sir, that there's a great deal of satisfaction in giving to others. But there is a moral obligation and a lawful obligation to take care of your own first. And if you're going to break your wife's spirit, if you're going to do her morale harm by overdoing your generosity, then you're not doing anything that is profitable or that is worthwhile. You've got to appraise this thing realistically and take into consideration your own circumstances and your own financial status. And you've got to take into consideration your marital obligations and what you owe to your wife. Give when you can, but when it's going to hurt her and when it's going to deprive her or be detrimental to her, then the answer must be no matter how worthy that cause is.
Dr. Fosdick?
Well, I think this is a clear case of being too good. Generosity is a marvelous virtue, and I admire this gentleman. The New Testament says it's more blessed to give than to receive, and he's found that out. He's having a lot of fun giving, and that's fine. But after all, generosity can be overdone. You're being generous to people whom you find come to you for help, but you're not being generous to your wife. You're not being just to your wife. I would going to put it bluntly, you're being outrageously unjust to your wife.
I appreciate that, Mr. Foster, because he is in debt. At the present time, he owes thousands of dollars.
I was just going on to say, you're not giving your money to help others. You're giving other people's money to help others. And if something happened to you tomorrow, your wife would be left with the burden of that debt. Of how much? Some thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, my friend, I'm sure that this situation cannot be solved until we recognize that generosity has to have a balanced budget too. So there is such a thing as being too much of a good thing. And I thoroughly agree with His Honor who just has spoken, that you ought to reappraise this situation, not to stop being generous, but certainly to get your debts paid, first of all, to get on an even keel, and then to keep a balanced budget on your generosity.
Dr. Eddy?
I wonder if it ever occurred to you that there are other ways of helping people this impulse that you have, this desire to be helpful to people, may take different forms. It isn't just loaning somebody else's money to them. Sometimes that may be the worst thing that you could do to help them. But there are services that you can render in your neighborhood, among the children, among people who are sick, who relating these people to social welfare agencies that do have the money.
I do that too, sir.
So that you can fulfill this very generous impulse and motivation and appreciation, what you feel, and appreciation for what God has given you and this country has given you, then go to work to help people with your own time, your own experience, your own insight, your own love, but save some of the money to pay your debts and take care of your family.
Dr. Fosdick, do you feel that psychologically there might be some desire on the part of this man to demonstrate his generosity? I mean, what do you think his motive is?
I didn't want to be unkind, but of course, as one who has dealt in personal counseling over a long while, I couldn't help saying to myself, I wonder if this gentleman isn't having so much fun being generous. He loves the prestige that it gives him among the people who know about his generosity. Generosity can take on an exhibitionist form, where there's a certain amount of show-off in being generous. Now, I'm not making an accusation, and I wouldn't have raised the question.
But I would like to know if that were so, Dr. Foster, how would he feel when he has to borrow the money? Doesn't that lower his esteem, or feel that he's not doing it where he has it? He has to ask someone else for it. Doesn't that make his ego feel less?
Well, apparently, Dr. Fosdick, the satisfaction that he gets out of doing it is far greater than any dissatisfaction he gets out of borrowing.
I think his wife has made a good point there. I think she's made an excellent point there, but I think your answer may also be true. It is fun. It does bring prestige to give. Now, I'm not saying that as an accusation, only I would suggest that the gentleman analyze himself a little and so help to bring his generosity under control so that it isn't completely out-balanced.
Well, to sum up, the board recognizes without question that it's wonderful for people to help each other. Somebody said that the greatest curse of the human race is selfishness, and we have a man here who wants not to be selfish. I think it's only fair to add, Dr. Fosdick, in connection with our colloquy a moment ago, that if ego is at the bottom of the things this man does, it might be pointed out that the ego motive, or the desire for the approval or admiration, is at the basis of a great deal of the public good that people do. Right. How many wonderful philanthropies are maintained just because people are recognized and honored for their public benefactions. But it has been established here, and very clearly, that everything is a matter of degree, that even the greatest virtue can become a vice if carried to an extreme. And it's the considered opinion of this board, after hearing all of these circumstances, that this man's basic obligation is certainly to his family, that there are many ways, as Dr. Eddy has just said, of doing good, of helping people, not necessarily involving money. Anyway, you just can't give what you haven't got.
As we conclude another session of the Court of Human Relations, it is our earnest hope that all parties in dispute will have the willingness of mind and the openness of heart to withdraw all resentment and realize that in life's plan, all things work together for good.